Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony, watching the massive alien ships drift past her small fleet. The Galactic Council meeting was ending, and once again humanity had been ignored. The tall, blue-skinned Altarians barely looked at her when they spoke about military matters. The Rocky Stoneman from Kepler Prime just grunted and turned away when she offered Earth's help with the growing threat. Primitive humans, she heard one of them whisper in their clicking language. They thought she couldn't understand. They were wrong about many things. Sarah kept her face calm and friendly, just like Earth had trained her to do. For 200 years, humanity had played this role perfectly. They acted weak, helpless, and grateful just to be part of the big galactic community. Every human ship looked old and slow. Every human weapon seemed basic compared to alien technology. Every human colony appeared barely able to defend itself. It was all a lie. "Commander," her communications officer called quietly. "Message from Earth Command. Priority 7. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Priority 7 messages were rare. Very rare. She walked to her private cabin and activated the secure channel that looked like a simple trade communication to anyone watching. The face of Admiral Morrison appeared on her screen. His expression was serious.
"Sarah, the Shadow Command wants a full report on hegemony movements."
"Intelligence suggests they're planning something big. The Shadow Command." Even thinking about it made Sarah nervous. Most humans didn't know it existed. Most aliens certainly didn't know. While the public face of humanity smiled and bowed to alien powers, the Shadow Command watched everything. They had ships the galaxy had never seen. They had weapons that would make the Council's military look like children with toys. "What do our deep scouts report?" Sarah asked. "Hegemony fleets are massing near the Vega sector. Their communications are heavily encrypted, but our code breakers think they're planning to hit multiple targets at once." Sarah nodded. The Hegemony Empire had been growing bolder each year. They conquered worlds and enslaved entire species. The Galactic Council did nothing but send angry messages and impose trade sanctions that meant nothing to a military empire. Any word on potential targets? Nothing confirmed. "But Sarah," Morrison paused. "Command wants you to know that if they target human civilians, everything changes." The connection ended, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. She looked out at the stars and wondered how long they could keep pretending. Earth had colonies on over 300 worlds now. Each one looked defenseless to outside observers. Each one was actually protected by hidden weapons platforms and disguised defense fleets. The intercom crackled. "Commander, the Altarian delegation wants to speak with you." Sarah straightened her uniform and put on her best humble expression. Time to play the role again. Admiral Slix-Ka towered over her when she entered the diplomatic quarters. His blue skin shimmered with the patterns that showed he was annoyed. Behind him stood 2 other Altarians and a representative from the Council's military division. "Human Chen," Slix-Ka said in his deep voice. "Your species continues to offer military assistance." "This is amusing," Sarah bowed slightly. "We only want to help, Admiral. Earth has many ships available for patrol duties or supply runs." The aliens exchanged looks. She could see them trying not to laugh. "Your ships are old, slow, and weak," the Council military rep said bluntly. "We appreciate the offer, but the hegemony crisis requires real warships, not human cargo haulers pretending to be military vessels." "Of course," Sarah replied with practiced humility. "We understand our limitations. Perhaps we could help with refugee transport or medical supplies?" Yes, Slix-Ka waved a massive hand. "Stick to what your species does well. Leave the fighting to those who know how to fight." When the meeting ended, Sarah returned to her ship feeling a familiar mix of anger and amusement. If only they knew what was hidden in the asteroid fields of the Sol system. If only they could see the real human military doctrine. If only they understood that every weak human ship had enough firepower to level a city. But they would learn eventually. Sarah just hoped it wouldn't come to that. 3 days later, the news reached them. A hegemony scout fleet had attacked research station Delta 9 near Proxima Centauri. The station was supposed to be a simple mining and research facility. According to all public records, it had basic shields and maybe a few defensive guns. The scout fleet had expected an easy target. Instead, they found themselves facing weapons that cut through their armor like paper. The station's basic shields absorbed hit after hit from military-grade weapons. When the hegemony ships tried to retreat, half of them never made it out of the system. The surviving hegemony commander's report was all over the intelligence networks within hours. "Impossible human technology," he kept repeating. Weapons that cannot exist. Shields beyond their capability. Sarah read the report in her cabin and smiled grimly. Research Station Delta 9 was one of the newer facilities. Its disguise technology was almost perfect, but apparently not quite good enough when faced with a direct military assault. The Galactic Council was buzzing with confusion. How could primitive humans have destroyed trained hegemony warriors? The official explanation was that the scout fleet must have been damaged in a previous battle, or perhaps the station got lucky with some kind of experimental weapon. Nobody suspected the truth. Nobody imagined that humans had been building real warships for 2 centuries while showing the galaxy cargo haulers with fake weapons attached. Nobody guessed that Earth's research stations were actually military outposts with enough firepower to stop invasion fleets. The hegemony empire was less confused than the Council, but far more angry. Their military pride had been wounded by inferior humans. Sarah intercepted their communications as they planned their response. They were going to show the galaxy what happened to species that dared to fight back against hegemony expansion. That night, Sarah sent a coded message to Earth Command. The mask is slipping. Hegemony planning retaliation. Request guidance on Protocol 7 authorization. The response came back within an hour. Just 2 words. Stand ready. Sarah Chen looked out at the stars one more time before going to sleep. Tomorrow, she would continue playing the role of a primitive human commander. With old ships and simple weapons, she would bow to alien superiority and accept their dismissive comments with grace. But in her dreams, she saw what would happen if the hegemony pushed too far. She saw the real human fleet emerging from hidden bases throughout the galaxy. She saw weapons that would make alien admirals weep with terror. She saw the end of the masquerade that had protected the galaxy from humanity's true nature for 200 years. The hegemony empire thought they were dealing with weak, frightened humans. They had no idea they were about to poke a sleeping giant that had been very carefully pretending to be harmless. Sarah smiled in her sleep. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't look dangerous at all. The alert came at 0347 hours ship time. Sarah Chen woke to the sound of her emergency communicator screaming red warnings into the dark cabin. She grabbed it with shaking hands, already knowing that something terrible had happened. Commander Chen here. Ma'am, this is Lieutenant Rodriguez from Earth Command. We have a Code Black situation. Proxima Station is under attack. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Proxima Station wasn't just any human outpost. It was home to over 50,000 civilians. Miners, scientists, their families, even children born in the outer colonies who had never seen Earth. It was supposed to be protected by the peace treaties. It was supposed to be safe. How bad? She asked, pulling on her uniform. Ma'am, the hegemony hit them with everything. 12 heavy cruisers and a battle carrier. They're not trying to capture the station. They're trying to destroy it completely. Sarah ran to the bridge where her crew was already gathering around the communication console. The main screen showed feeds from news networks across the galaxy. Emergency broadcasts were coming in from multiple sources, all saying the same thing. Proxima Station was fighting for its life. The images were horrible. Massive hegemony warships surrounded the civilian station like wolves around a wounded deer. The station's shields were holding, but everyone could see they wouldn't last long against that much firepower. Escape pods were launching, but the hegemony fighters were hunting them down one by one. Why? Whispered Communications Officer Park. It's just a mining station. There's nothing there worth a military assault. Sarah knew why. The hegemony was making a statement. They were showing the galaxy that even species under Council protection could be destroyed at will. They were proving that the Council's promises of safety meant nothing against real military power. What the hegemony didn't know was that they had just made the worst mistake in their empire's history. The station held out for 6 hours. Sarah watched every minute of it, along with billions of beings across the galaxy. The human defenders fought with desperate courage, using their primitive weapons to hold off ships that should have crushed them in minutes. But courage wasn't enough against overwhelming force. At 0947 hours, Proxima Station's reactor went critical. The explosion lit up space for millions of kilometers in every direction. 53,000 human civilians died in that flash of light. The Galactic Council's response was swift and completely useless. They issued a strong condemnation of hegemony actions. They imposed new trade sanctions. They promised a full investigation and eventual justice for the victims. Sarah stared at the official council statement with growing rage. Words. Just words. While human children burned in space, the council offered words. Her private communicator chimed with an encrypted message from Earth Command. She read it 3 times before the meaning sank in. Protocol 7 authorized. Shadow Command active. The masquerade is over. Show them what we really are. Morrison. Sarah's hands trembled as she deleted the message. Protocol 7. She had hoped never to see those words. Every human officer knew what it meant, but they all prayed it would never be necessary. For 200 years, humanity had hidden its true strength. They had acted weak and helpless while building the most powerful military force in galactic history. They had smiled and bowed while preparing for the day when diplomacy would fail. That day had come. Commander, Lieutenant Rodriguez was looking at her with concern. Are you all right? Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. Good people. Brave people. People who had spent their careers pretending to be something they weren't. Soon they would all learn what they really were. Rodriguez, send a message to all human ships in this sector. Full encryption, Shadow Command protocols. Tell them to prepare for Phase 1 revelation. Her communications officer's eyes went wide. Every human in the military knew about the Shadow Command, even if they had never seen it in action. It was the secret behind the secret, the hidden military force that made their peaceful masquerade possible. Ma'am, are you sure? Once we activate those protocols, there's no going back, Sarah finished. I know. Do it anyway. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening on hundreds of human ships. Cargo haulers that had spent decades moving supplies from world to world suddenly received new orders. Their captains opened sealed instructions that had been locked away for emergencies. Engineering crews began activating systems that had been disguised as simple life support equipment. On Earth, Prime Minister Jackson Kane stood before an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. The room was deep underground, protected by shields that could stop antimatter bombs. Most humans didn't even know it existed. The hegemony has crossed our red line, Kane said quietly. They have deliberately targeted our civilians. They have shown the galaxy that they believe human lives are worth nothing. The Defense Council members nodded grimly. They had all seen the footage from Proxima Station. They had all watched human children die while the galaxy's great powers offered empty words of sympathy. What are our options, Prime Minister? Asked Defense Secretary Williams. Kane activated a holographic display that showed the true structure of human space defense. Hidden bases in asteroid fields, weapons platforms disguised as communication satellites, entire fleets of warships that the galaxy had never seen. We show them why humanity chose to hide, Kane said. We show them what happens when predators mistake our restraint for weakness. General Harrison, head of Shadow Command, stood up. He was a small, quiet man who had spent 40 years preparing for this moment. Mr. Prime Minister, our forces are ready. We have been monitoring hegemony movements for months. We know where their fleets are, where their leaders are hiding, where their families live. Their families? Kane raised an eyebrow. The hegemony targeted our civilians, sir. They broke the unwritten rules of civilized warfare. If we respond with traditional military action, they'll just claim it was a legitimate battle between armed forces. Kane understood. The hegemony had to learn that there were consequences for targeting innocents. They had to understand that humanity's mercy was a choice, not a weakness. Do it, he said quietly. But remember, we're not becoming like them. We're showing them why they should have feared us from the beginning. In space, the transformation began slowly. Human merchant ships requested docking at stations across the galaxy for routine maintenance. Once inside the repair bays, their disguises fell away. Fake cargo pods opened to reveal advanced weapons systems. False hull plating was removed to show armor stronger than anything the galaxy had seen. The UES Harmony, Sarah's command ship, underwent its own metamorphosis. The old slow engines were revealed to be the most advanced propulsion system ever built. The simple defensive guns turned out to be weapons that could punch through capital ship armor. The basic sensors were actually sophisticated spy equipment that had been monitoring alien communications for decades. Sarah stood on her bridge and watched her ship transform from a primitive human vessel into something that would give alien admirals nightmares. Her crew worked with practiced efficiency, no longer pretending to be confused by their own technology. Commander, her weapons officer reported, all systems are online. We are ready for combat operations. Sarah nodded. Around her, the galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest deception wasn't hiding their weakness. It was hiding their strength. The Hegemony Empire had lit a fire at Proxima Station. Now they were going to discover that they had been playing with matches next to a powder keg. The first sign that everything had changed came 12 hours after Proxima Station died. Admiral Vex Corps of the Hegemony 4th Fleet was leading 47 warships toward the Centauri colonies when his sensors detected incoming human vessels. 5 human cargo ships approaching. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported with amusement. "They appear to be fleeing the system." Vex Corps clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. The destruction of Proxima Station was already having the desired effect. The weak humans were running scared, abandoning their colonies rather than face hegemony military might. "Let them pass," he ordered. "We want survivors to spread word of what happens to those who oppose the Empire." But the human ships didn't pass by. Instead, they formed a battle line directly in front of the Hegemony fleet. Vex Corps stared at his display in confusion. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "the lead human vessel is transmitting." "Put it through," Vex Corps said, curious to hear what desperate plea the humans would make. The face that appeared on his screen was calm and cold. Commander Sarah Chen looked directly into his eyes without a trace of fear. "Hegemony vessels," she said quietly. "You are ordered to turn around and leave this system immediately. This is your only warning." Vex Corps' officers burst into laughter. 5 primitive human cargo haulers were threatening 47 military warships. It was the most ridiculous thing they had ever heard. "Human commander," Vex Corps replied with mock politeness. "You have 30 seconds to clear our path before we destroy you. Your pathetic ships are no match for real military power." Sarah Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "You killed 53,000 of our civilians yesterday," she said. "Today you learn why that was a mistake." The transmission ended. Vex Corps shook his head in disbelief. Human arrogance was truly amazing. "All ships fire at will," he commanded. "Destroy those cargo haulers." 47 hegemony warships opened fire at once. Enough energy to glass a planet erupted from their weapons, streaking toward the tiny human fleet. The space between them lit up like a new star as thousands of plasma bolts and energy beams struck their targets. When the light faded, the 5 human ships were still there. Their shields hadn't even flickered. Vex Corps' jaw dropped open. "Impossible," he whispered. The human ships began to change. Their hulls split open like flowers blooming, revealing sleek weapons arrays underneath. False cargo pods fell away to show armor that gleamed with unknown metals. Engines that had looked old and slow suddenly blazed with power that bent space around them. "Admiral?" his sensor officer called out in a shaking voice. "Those aren't cargo ships. I'm reading weapons signatures unlike anything in our database. Their power output is..." "It's impossible." The UES Harmony fired first. A single beam of silver light reached across space and touched the Hegemony flagship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive dreadnought simply came apart, its atoms scattered to the solar wind. The other human ships opened fire together. Hegemony vessels that had terrorized entire sectors exploded like children's toys. In less than 3 minutes, 47 warships became clouds of glowing debris. Only Vex Corps' command ship survived, its engines disabled, its weapons destroyed. Sarah Chen's voice came through the communications again. "Admiral Vex Corps," she said calmly, "you will return to your empire. You will tell them exactly what you saw here. You will make sure they understand that humanity is no longer hiding." Vex Corps could only stare at his ruined fleet. What are you?" "We're the species you should have been afraid of from the beginning," Sarah replied. "We've been pretending to be weak for 200 years. That pretense is over. Across the galaxy, similar encounters were taking place. Human merchant ships shed their disguises and revealed themselves as advanced warships. Space stations that had looked like simple trade posts opened up to show massive weapons arrays. Mining colonies activated defense systems that made planetary assault impossible. The Galactic Council emergency session was chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted over each other, demanding explanations that no one could give. "How did we not know?" demanded the Altarian delegate. "Our intelligence services monitor all human activities." Council Military Director Thane Ka pounded his gavel for order. "The reports are still coming in, but it appears that humanity has been operating a parallel military structure that we never detected." "Parallel?" The delegate from Rigel 7 laughed bitterly. "Director, they've been lying to us for 2 centuries. Every human ship we've seen was fake. Every defense installation was camouflaged. They've been playing us for fools. On Earth, the transformation was even more dramatic. Orbital platforms that had looked like communication satellites unfolded into weapons arrays capable of destroying entire fleets. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt began launching vessels that made the Council's most advanced warships look primitive. Prime Minister Kane stood in the Earth Defense Command Center, watching reports flood in from across human space. Every hidden base was coming online. Every disguised weapon was revealing itself. 2 centuries of careful deception was ending in a single day. "Status report," he ordered. General Harrison consulted his displays. "All Shadow Command units are active and responding. Hegemony forces have engaged our revealed units in 17 systems. Estimated enemy losses so far, 843 warships destroyed, minimal damage to our forces." Minimal? 3 ships report minor shield fluctuations, sir. Nothing requiring repair. Kane nodded grimly. The numbers were what he had expected, but they still made him feel sick. Each destroyed enemy ship represented hundreds of lives lost. But the Hegemony had chosen this path when they murdered civilians at Proxima Station. What about the galaxy's reaction? Panic, mostly. Every major power is recalibrating their threat assessments of humanity. The Council is demanding explanations. The Hegemony is... Harrison paused. The Hegemony is mobilizing everything they have, sir. They're calling it a war of extermination. Kane wasn't surprised. The Hegemony's entire culture was built on military dominance. Having their fleets destroyed by primitive humans was more than a military defeat. It was a blow to their very identity. They would fight to the death rather than admit they had been wrong about humanity. "Let them come," Kane said quietly. "We've been preparing for this war for 200 years. It's time to finish it." Deep in space, Admiral Chen received new orders from Earth Command. The first phase of revelation was complete. Now came the hard part, showing the galaxy that humanity's hidden strength wasn't just advanced technology. It was something far more dangerous. She looked at her tactical display, which showed Hegemony reinforcements massing in a dozen systems. They were bringing everything: battle fleets, siege platforms, planet-killer weapons. The Emperor himself was leading the charge, determined to crush the humans who had dared to humiliate his empire. Sarah smiled coldly. The Hegemony thought this was about military technology. They thought better ships and bigger guns would be enough to win. They had no idea what they were really facing. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't hidden ships or secret bases. It was something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that had studied every enemy for 2 centuries, learning their weaknesses, understanding their fears, and preparing to use that knowledge without mercy. The Hegemony wanted a war of extermination. They were about to get one, just not the way they expected. Emperor Krexvon stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Domination, and watched his invasion armada assemble. Over 3,000 warships filled the space around the gas giant Kolos Prime. It was the largest military force in Hegemony history, gathered for one purpose: the complete destruction of humanity. "My Emperor," Admiral Zothkar approached with careful steps. "All fleets report ready for the final assault on human space. We have siege platforms, planet crackers, and enough firepower to sterilize every human world." Krexvon's 4 eyes glowed with satisfaction. The humans had surprised them with their hidden technology. But surprise only worked once. Now the Empire knew what they were facing, and they had brought overwhelming force to crush the upstart species. "What of their fleet positions?" the Emperor asked. "Scattered throughout their territory, my lord. They appear to be defending individual systems rather than massing for a decisive battle. Classic weak species tactics." Krexvon nodded. Humans were still thinking like prey animals, trying to protect everything instead of concentrating their forces. It would make the conquest longer but more satisfying. They would destroy human fleets piece by piece, then burn their worlds until nothing remained. What the Emperor didn't know was that humanity was watching every move his armada made. Hidden sensor networks tracked each ship, each communication, each strategic decision. The human commanders weren't scattering their forces in panic. They were positioning themselves exactly where they wanted to be. Admiral Sarah. Chen received the intelligence reports in her ready room aboard the UES Harmony. The Hegemony was moving exactly as Earth's psychological warfare experts had predicted. Pride and rage were making them predictable. They're dividing their forces into 5 attack groups, she reported to Earth Command during a secure briefing, each one targeting a major human system. General Harrison's image flickered on her screen. Perfect. Are our psychological operations ready? All set, sir. Every hegemony officer above the rank of fleet commander has received our special messages. Sarah smiled grimly. The messages weren't threats or demands for surrender. They were something much more effective, detailed information about where each officer's family was located, what their children looked like, what schools they attended, what their daily routines were. Humanity had spent 2 centuries mapping every major alien civilization. They knew the locations of government buildings, military bases, and civilian populations. More importantly, they understood the psychology of each species. They knew exactly what would break their enemy's will to fight. The first psychological strike happened during the hegemony's approach to the Ross 128 system. Admiral Kothven was leading the second attack fleet when his personal communicator received an encrypted transmission. The message was simple. Your daughter Sithka attends the military academy on Hegemony Prime. She has combat training every Tuesday at 1400 hours. Her favorite instructor is Colonel Rexmall. Yesterday she scored 847 points on her marksmanship test. Kothven stared at the message in horror. His daughter's academy was in the most secure system in the Empire, protected by orbital fortresses and 3 fleet squadrons. The humans shouldn't even know it existed, let alone have detailed information about his child's daily schedule. Similar messages reached every hegemony commander. Each one contained impossibly detailed intelligence about their families, their homes, their personal lives. The humans weren't just saying they could reach anywhere in the Empire, they were proving it. The psychological assault escalated when human ships began appearing in hegemony space itself. Not invasion fleets, but single vessels that seemed to materialize from nowhere, broadcast a message and vanish before defensive forces could respond. On Hegemony Prime, the Empire's capital world, citizens looked up to see a human ship hovering directly above the Imperial Palace. It stayed just long enough to transmit detailed architectural plans of the building, including the Emperor's private chambers, before disappearing into hyperspace. How? Emperor Krexvon demanded of his intelligence chiefs. How are they getting ships through our defenses? General Thekkor, head of Imperial Intelligence, could only shake his head. We don't know, my Emperor. Their stealth technology is beyond our ability to detect. They could have ships anywhere in our territory right now. The Emperor's 4 eyes burned with rage and fear. The humans were demonstrating that nowhere in his empire was safe. If they could reach the capital world undetected, they could strike anywhere, anytime. But the real shock came when human forces began their counterattack. The Hegemony First Attack Fleet, approaching the Alpha Centauri system, suddenly found itself surrounded by human vessels that seemed to appear from empty space. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the engagement from her command center. The humans didn't just outnumber the Hegemony fleet, they outclassed it completely. Ships that the Empire had considered state-of-the-art were torn apart by weapons that bent the laws of physics. But the real demonstration of human capability came when the surviving Hegemony ships tried to retreat. Instead of letting them go, the human fleet pursued them all the way back to Hegemony space. They didn't stop at the border. They followed the fleeing ships deep into the Empire's territory, destroying military installations and orbital defenses with casual efficiency. When they reached the fortress world of Dominion Prime, where the Hegemony leadership had retreated for safety, the human fleet didn't even slow down. They simply flew through the impregnable defensive grid as if it wasn't there. Impossible, breathed Admiral Zothkar, as he watched human ships pass through energy barriers that should have vaporized them. Those shields can stop anything. Sarah Chen's voice came through the communication system, calm and cold. Admiral, your shields were designed to stop hegemony weapons. We've been studying your technology for 200 years. We know how to defeat every defense you have. The human fleet took orbit around Dominion Prime and began a demonstration that broke the will of every hegemony commander watching. They didn't attack the planet's defenses. They simply turned them off. One by one, the massive orbital fortresses went dark as human ships took control of their computer systems. How are you doing this? Zothkar demanded. Every piece of technology in your empire is based on designs we helped you develop, Sarah replied. Every computer system contains code written by human programmers working as cultural exchange specialists. Every weapon system has components manufactured in human factories that you thought were primitive. The truth hit the hegemony leadership like a physical blow. For 2 centuries, humanity had been involved in their technology development. Human experts had shared primitive innovations that actually contained hidden backdoors and control systems. Human trade goods had carried sophisticated spy networks throughout the empire. The hegemony hadn't just been fooled by humanity's peaceful facade. They had been systematically compromised from within. Their most advanced military technology was under human control. Their most secure communications networks had been monitored from the beginning. Their empire had been hollowed out by an enemy they thought was weak. Emperor Krex Von sat on his throne and watched his empire crumble around him. Reports flooded in from across hegemony space. Fleets surrendering without a fight. Fortress worlds going dark. Entire sectors falling under human control without a shot being fired. My emperor, General Thekkor, approached with shaking hands. The humans are offering terms. Terms? Krex Von's voice was hollow. What do they want? Complete surrender of all hegemony military forces. Dissolution of the empire. War crimes trials for all officers involved in civilian attacks and... Thekkor swallowed hard. Personal custody of every member of the imperial family. The emperor closed his 4 eyes. The humans weren't just defeating his military. They were dismantling his entire civilization. And they were doing it without even breathing hard. Tell them, he said quietly, that the hegemony empire surrenders unconditionally. In her command center, Admiral Sarah Chen received the surrender and felt no satisfaction. The hegemony had forced this war by targeting civilians. Now they were paying the price for that decision. But she knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was watching, and they were learning that humanity's 2 centuries of peace hadn't been weakness. It had been preparation for war without mercy. The Galactic Council chambers had never been so quiet. Representatives from 47 species sat in stunned silence as the reports continued to arrive. The hegemony empire, one of the most feared military powers in known space, had surrendered completely to humanity in less than 6 days. Council Director Thane Ka read the final casualty reports with growing disbelief. Hegemony military losses complete. All fleets destroyed or surrendered. All fortress worlds captured. All leadership in human custody. He paused, his voice shaking. Human losses. 17 ships with minor damage. No casualties. The silence stretched longer. Finally, the Altarian delegate spoke in a whisper. How is that possible? Prime Minister Jackson Kane of Earth stepped forward to address the council for the first time in 2 centuries. His presence on the council floor was itself a shock. Human leaders had always sent ambassadors, never appearing personally at these meetings. Honored representatives, Kane began, his voice calm but carrying clearly through the chamber. For the past 200 years, humanity has maintained a careful deception. We allowed you to believe we were weak, primitive, and grateful for your protection. He activated a holographic display that showed the true scope of human space presence. Hidden bases appeared throughout the galaxy like stars being born. Disguised fleets revealed themselves in systems that the Council had thought were empty. The network of human intelligence and military power was vast beyond imagination. Every cargo ship you saw was a warship in disguise. Every mining station was a military outpost. Every human diplomat, trader, or cultural exchange specialist was gathering intelligence on your species, your technology, and your weaknesses. The council representatives stared at the display in horror. The scope of human deception was staggering. For 2 centuries, they had been completely infiltrated and monitored by a species they considered barely civilized. Why? Demanded the delegate from Rigel 7. Why the deception? Why not reveal your true strength? Kane's expression grew cold. Because we hoped it would never be necessary. Humanity chose to hide our capabilities because we believed the galaxy could govern itself peacefully. We were wrong. He gestured to the reports from hegemony space. The Empire targeted civilian populations. They murdered 53,000 non-combatants, including children, to make a political statement. They proved that some species only understand force. The Vegan representative, a tall insectoid being, clicked nervously. What happens now? What are humanity's intentions toward the rest of the galaxy? Kane looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate. That depends on you. Humanity has no desire to rule the galaxy. But we will no longer tolerate threats to innocent populations. Any species that targets civilians, any government that wages wars of extermination, any empire that believes might makes right will face the same fate as the hegemony. Admiral Sarah Chen entered the chamber, her dress uniform displaying medals that most species had never seen before. She carried a datapad containing the new galactic security protocols that Earth had prepared. The galaxy will have peace, she announced, but it will be a peace enforced by those capable of maintaining it. Humanity is establishing the Galactic Protection Force. Any species may join as equals, but all will abide by the same rules. She activated another display showing human fleets positioning themselves throughout galactic space, not as conquerors but as peacekeepers with the power to stop any aggression before it could spread. These are the new rules, Chen continued. No targeting of civilian populations. No wars of conquest. No slavery or forced labor. No genocide or species extermination. Any violation will result in immediate human intervention. The Centaurian delegate raised a tentative hand. What if we refuse to accept human authority? Kane answered quietly. Then you prove that the galaxy cannot govern itself peacefully, and we will govern it for you. The threat was delivered without anger or emotion, which somehow made it more terrifying. The humans weren't threatening conquest out of greed or ambition. They were simply stating that they would impose peace whether the galaxy wanted it or not. Back on Earth, the transformation was complete. The hidden bases revealed themselves openly. The disguised ships shed their false appearances permanently. The Shadow Command stepped out of the shadows to become humanity's public face to the galaxy. General Harrison stood in the Global Defense Command Center, watching feeds from across human space. After 2 centuries of hiding, it felt strange to see their true military might displayed openly. Massive shipyards that had been disguised as asteroid mining operations now worked around the clock to build the peacekeeping fleets. Weapons platforms that had masqueraded as communication satellites took their positions as the galaxy's new guardians. Any word from the remaining hegemony leadership? Kane asked as he returned from the council session. Emperor Krex Von and his inner circle are in custody on Titan base. War crimes trials will begin next month. The rest of the hegemony military leadership has either surrendered or removed themselves from the equation. Kane nodded grimly. Many hegemony officers had chosen suicide rather than face the humiliation of defeat by inferior humans. Their warrior culture couldn't accept that they had been outmatched so completely. What about the other powers? Any signs of resistance to our new position? Harrison consulted his intelligence reports. Some grumbling, especially from the Altarians and the Rigel Confederation, but nothing approaching actual resistance. I think seeing what happened to the hegemony convinced them that opposition would be unwise. On her flagship, Admiral Chen watched the final hegemony vessels being escorted to internment facilities. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Humanity now had to prove they could enforce galactic peace without becoming the tyrants they had replaced. Her communications officer announced an incoming message from the Altarian Military Command. Admiral Slikska appeared on the screen, his blue skin pattern showing deep resignation. Admiral Chen, he said formally. The Altarian Republic wishes to discuss joining your Galactic Protection Force. Sarah nodded respectfully. We welcome Altarian participation, Admiral. Your experience and knowledge will be valuable assets to galactic security. Slikska's pattern shifted to surprise. You're not demanding our submission? Admiral, humanity has no interest in ruling other species. We want partners in maintaining peace, not subjects to control. It was the first of many such conversations. Across the galaxy, species that had expected human conquest were instead offered partnership. Former enemies were invited to join the peacekeeping effort. The humans weren't interested in building an empire. They were building something that had never existed before. True galactic stability. But some species learned too late that humanity's offer of partnership had limits. When the Rigel Confederation attempted to test human resolve by attacking a defenseless trade convoy, they discovered that the humans' patience had boundaries. The entire Rigel military was neutralized in 43 minutes. Not destroyed, simply rendered completely incapable of offensive action. Their ships' weapons were remotely disabled. Their military bases went dark. Their command structure found itself locked out of its own systems. The message was clear. Humanity would enforce peace through overwhelming superiority, but they preferred cooperation to conquest. Years later, historians would mark the end of the Hegemony War as the beginning of the Pax Humana, the human peace that brought stability to a galaxy that had known only conflict for millennia. Some species remembered it as the day they lost their independence. Others saw it as the day they gained security from predators who had terrorized them for generations. Admiral Sarah Chen, now Director of Galactic Security, stood on the observation deck of her new headquarters orbiting Earth. The galaxy spread out before her, peaceful for the first time in recorded history. No wars of conquest burned across the stars. No empires enslaved weaker species. No madmen dreamed of galactic domination. But Chen knew the peace was fragile. It existed only because humanity had the power to enforce it, and the will to use that power when necessary. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most dangerous predator was the one that chose not to hunt, until something threatened what it protected. Earth had concealed its true power for 2 centuries, hoping the galaxy would find its own path to peace. When that hope died at Proxima Station, humanity had revealed itself as the apex predator of known space. Now they stood guard over a galaxy that would never again mistake human restraint for human weakness. The age of galactic warfare was over. The age of human guardianship had begun.